In the last lectures, we learned a lot about state and props. And you learned that every component receives props, and that since React 16.8, you can also manage state in every component. Prior to that version, you could only manage state in class-based components. Now, either way, no matter if you're creating a component with the class keyword or as a functional component, if you are managing state in it, either with the state property and this set state, or with the React use state hook, no matter which of the approaches you're using, you can differentiate your components in stateful and stateless components. A stateful component is a component that manages state, no matter if it's using the use state hook or a class-based approach with the state property. A component like the person.js file, so this person component, is a stateless component because it has no internal state management. And it is a good practice to create as many of these stateless components, also called dump, because they have no internal logic, or presentational components, because they present something, they output content, they only get external data and output it in a structured way. It is a good practice to use as many of these stateless, dump, presentational components as possible in your application. These stateful components, so either class-based with state or functional with use state, are also called smart components or container components because they contain the state of your application. Of these components, you only want to have a couple. Well, of course, that depends on the size of your app. If you have an app with thousands of components, you'll also have multiple containers, so stateful components. But the idea is that you restrict yourself to a setup where you have way more functional presentational components than stateful components. Now, why? Because this makes your app easier to maintain and manage. You have a clear flow of data, and it's very clear where your main logic sits and where your data changes and then is distributed to the rest of your app. So if anyone, including yourself, ever needs to change something about the app, it's clear where to make that change. If every component in your app manages its own state, you quickly end up with spaghetti code where everyone is doing everything. And that can make your app very hard to reuse, to maintain, and so on. So have as many pure, functional, presentational components as possible, and only use state, no matter how, in a few selected components. And keep these terms in mind, because you will hear me say container or stateful or smart component for these stateful components in this course. And you'll also hear me say presentational, stateless, or dump component, which means such components, of which you should have more than stateful components.